What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so I thought I would continue with my all-time top 10 point guards. Just my opinion. You don't have to agree with it. At number 10, I had Steve Nash. At number 9, I had Jason Kidd. And at number 8, I have a guy who I think is perhaps a guy that gets largely forgotten. I don't really hear his name mentioned anymore as far as all-time great point guards. Um, it's a shame. I don't understand quite why. But it also goes to show you that once again, offense is more highlighted today than defense, and that's Walt Clyde Frazier. You know what I'm saying? Walt Clyde Frazier um, was the gold standard when it came to, I guess, what you would call a complete all-around point guard or a two-way guard, or just a guy that, for his day and age, this is largely before the 3 point line, he was a complete all around player. You know what I'm saying? He was on defense, phenomenal. He was known for his exceptional quickness, especially having quick hands. They didn't start registering steals, I think, the NBA until the 73-74 season. But it's quite possible that, in the early 70s, Walt Frazier may have a couple of those seasons led the NBA in steals had they, uh, you know, uh, covered that. He had exceptional peripheral vision, so he was a great passer. He could score. In those days, though, players played more within a team concept. Centers were still dominant. It was still a center dominant game, so you weren't really going to have, except for in certain circumstances like Nate Archibald with the Kings, rare exceptions like that. You weren't really going to have a lot of point guards pouring in a lot of points. But he did average 19 points a game for his career and 19 points a game for the New York Knicks. And he was as known for his style as well as is maybe even more so than his game. And maybe that's what it is. A lot of people might think that Walt Clyde Frazier is known more for his stylish attire rather than his game, but no, it just emphasized the personality behind the great player. He was a tremendous floor general, and he was one of the great perimeter defenders of his era. In fact, he was a seven-time All First, uh, defensive player. So that's only two behind people like Gary Payton, uh, Jordan, uh, Kobe. That's up there with Pippen. He was a great, to me. He's the second greatest defensive point guard behind Gary Payton. And you could make the argument that he was a better all around player than Gary Payton. He was a better, you know, Payton worked really hard to get to where he was. Um, Frazier was bigger, stronger. I'm not going to say quicker, but he was a better scorer, even though, he never averaged 23, 24, I don't think, in certain. He might have. I got to check that out. But he was a better natural scorer. Walt Frazier was money for mid range. They didn't shoot threes. They didn't have 3 point. They didn't have a 3 point line when he played. But in the playoffs, I think his career average was over 20 points per game. But he was known as the catalyst for those Knicks teams. If Willis Reed was the heart of those Knicks teams, then Walt Clyde Frazier was the soul of those Knicks teams that won championships in the early 1970s. Walt Clyde Frazier was born in 1945, and he was the eldest of nine children. And he went to David Tobias Howard High School in Atlanta. In high school, he played quarterback in football, and he was also a catcher playing baseball. Eventually, he turned his attentions to basketball. And although he did receive some scholarship offers for his football ability, Frazier accepted a basketball offer for Southern Illinois University. Frazier became one of the premier collegiate basketball players in the country. He was named a Division II All-American in 1964 and 1965. As a sophomore in 1965, Frazier led SIU to the NCAA Division II tournament, only to lose in the finals to Jerry Sloan, the late Jerry Sloan, and the Evansville Purple Aces 85-82 in overtime. In 1966, however, he was academically ineligible for basketball. The next year, Frazier, once again eligible, led his team to the National Invitation Tournament, which they won, beating Marquette University 71-56 in the final, in the last college basketball game played at the old Madison Square Garden in New York. Frazier was named the MVP of the 1967 tournament. Walt Frazier was drafted fifth overall by the New York Knicks in his rookie year. And he struggled in his rookie year, only averaging about 9 points per game. But this would turn around with the acquisition of new head coach Red Holzman, one of the great coaches of all time. Under Red Holzman, who emphasized defense, this was a natural strength of Walt Clyde Frazier, and he ballooned. I mean, he really blossomed in his second year. He went from averaging only 9 points his rookie year to averaging 17.5 points, 7.9 assists, and 6.2 rebounds during his second year, making him one of the most improved players in the NBA. In the 1969-1970 season, Walt Clyde Frazier was chosen as an NBA All-Star, the first of 7 such selections he would have during his 10-year stint with the New York Knicks. The Knicks made it all the way to the 1970 NBA Finals thanks to the great play of both Walt Frazier and star teammate Willis Reed. However, in Game 5, the Knicks' title chances seemed bleak after Willis Reed suffered a painful leg injury. While the Knicks were able to rally and win that game off the emotion of being, of the moment, in Game 6, the absence of Willis Reed was glaring, and I believe Wilt Chamberlain scored something like 45 points in Game 6 in their absence. In Game 7, there was a lot of cloud as far as doubt is concerned about whether Willis was going to play, and many people thought that he probably wasn't going to play. And however, Willis Reed did return to the team, albeit in a more of a token and more of an inspirational role. He did make the first 2 shots of the game for the New York Knicks, but that was all the emotional lift that they needed, and they wound up beating the Los Angeles Lakers in Game 7. But it was largely behind, even though the Willis Reed legend was strong and continues to be strong, he did only score 4 points. It was really the monster performance by Walt Clyde Frazier that led the way. In that game, Walt Clyde Frazier had 36 points, 7 rebounds, 19 assists, which is an all-time playoff high for him, and 6 steals. And many people still consider that to be the greatest Game 7 performance in history. I think Charles Barkley's 44 points and 24 rebounds in Game 7 um, against the Sonics is pretty high up there too, even though that wasn't a finals game. But the Knicks were unable to repeat as champions in 1971 as they fell to the Baltimore Bullets in the second round of the playoffs. After that season, the Knicks traded for Earl the Pearl Monroe. This was controversial at the time because Earl the Pearl Monroe, who was a star with the team that just eliminated them from the playoffs, the Baltimore Bullets. This was controversial because Earl the Pearl Monroe was a high-scoring guard who was sort of used to dominating the basketball. And many people felt like this was going to cause chemistry issues with the Knicks and probably derail their championship aspirations or continued championship aspirations. But actually, it worked. Um, Earl Monroe made changes to his game. He sacrificed his game offensively, and he ended up being actually a pretty capable defensive player. And it gave the Knicks much added depth in their backcourt. The Knicks returned to the NBA Finals in 1972, but they lost to the legendary 69 win Lakers. The next year, in 1973, the Knicks returned to the NBA Finals, but this time they defeated the Los Angeles Lakers in a 5-game series, 4-1. And in this particular series, he was notable in shutting down Hall of Famer Jerry West. He really gave Jerry West trouble in that series. I mean, one could say it was age, possibly, but he really shut down Jerry West in that series. And for the rest of the 1970s, for the most part, the Knicks remained a really good team. It also should be noted in 1973, they, in the Eastern Conference Finals, the Knicks upsetted the team that was actually favored to go to the finals, the 1973 Boston Celtics, who won a franchise record 68 games. The Knicks won 60 games themselves that year, which still shares the franchise record with the 93 Knicks. But that Boston team had the MVP in Dave Cowens and the coach of the year in Tom Heinz at the time. But the Knicks, I believe, beat them 4-2 in the Eastern Conference Finals before they went on to beat the Lakers in 5 in the finals. The Knicks remained a really good team for quite a while, but they never again reached the NBA Finals. But throughout the 70s, they still remained a really good team. Interestingly, even though uh, Walt Frazier is known for his great defense, it is interesting that in February of 1977, it was the Knicks backcourt that gave up that 68-point game to Pete Maravich. So I just had to mention that. All right. Um, Walt Frazier, after the 1976-77 season, that season I just mentioned, he was traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers. At this particular time, the Knicks were starting to show their age. The Knicks were declining as a team. And he was traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers. And this trade was very unpopular with Knicks fans. This was after retirement of Willis Reed. This was after some of the retirements of other players from those earlier 70s teams. And, in many cases, he was the last remaining piece, or one of the last remaining pieces from that championship era. And his trade was very unpopular at the time. And the Knicks would be, after his trade, the Knicks would not return to prominence as an actual threat really for another 15 years until Pat Riley arrived in 1991. But when Walt Clyde Frazier left the Knicks, he was the all-time leader at the time for most games played, 759, minutes played, 28,995, field goals attempted, field goals made, free throws attempted, free throws made, assists, and points. Most of these records have been broken by Patrick Ewing, but Frazier's assist records, assist record of 4,791, still stands today. Uh, Toward the end of his career with the Cavaliers, Walt Clyde Frazier began to have injury issues, and he retired midway through the 1979-80 season when he only played in 3 games and averaged only 3 points and 3 assists. For his career, Walt Clyde Frazier shot a superb 49% from the floor and an above average 79% from the foul line. And in fact, from 1971 onward, he consistently shot well over 80% from the foul line. He averaged 18.9 points per game for his career and 19.3 points per game for the New York Knicks. And he had a career high of 23.2 points per game during the 1971-72 season. For his career, he averaged 1.9 steals. He had a career high in 1974-75 of 2.4 steals per game. But it must be noted that the first 6 years of his career, steals were not noted, and he may have possibly led the NBA steals during one of those seasons. It's not known. For the playoffs for his career, he averaged 20.7 points per game. His best campaign was during the 1972 season when he averaged 24.3 points, 7 rebounds, and 6.1 assists, and shot a blistering 54% from the floor during that playoff run. Walt Clyde Frazier is largely forgotten today. He was a great all-around guard. He was, smooth to watch. He had a real smooth game. He had a really interesting shot release that kind of looked a little like, to me, his shot release always looked a little like Clyde Drexler's a little bit. They kind of have a similar shot release. But, yeah, to me, he's still a top 10 point guard. I thought about it. I really thought about all of the point guards. And at the end of the day, I had to keep him in my top 10. You know what I'm saying? So to me, Walt Clyde Frazier is number 8 all time when it comes to point guards in pro basketball history. Now, it's key I say pro basketball because I do include the ABA in some of my assessments for players. You know what I'm saying? So that's something that I do differently than some other people who only go by NBA. I do add the ABA when I'm assessing certain players that played in the ABA and the NBA. So that is probably why I might have, for instance, George Gervin ranked higher than some people, or why I might have Artis Gilmore or Julius Erving ranked higher than some people, because I'm also taking in, or Moses Malone, or whoever, because I'm taking in their ABA as well as NBA productivity. But some of you guys, I forgot to mention some more of his accolades. He was a 7-time All-Star, if I didn't mention that. And he was the 1975 All-Star Game MVP. He was 4 times All-NBA first team, 2-time All-NBA second team. He was on the 1968 NBA All-Rookie first team. He was, of course, one of the 50 greatest mentioned back in 1996, 1997. His number 10 is retired by the New York Knicks, and his number 52 is retired by Southern Illinois. Walt Clyde Frazier.